What is going on, investors? Hopefully, guys are doing well out there. It is Friday. You've probably got that AC cranked up, and it's time to crank things up here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday we recap all the major news and the technical chart patterns from all the major FAANG stocks. Next week, we'll have Netflix earnings, followed by the rest of these companies reporting earnings over the next couple of weeks. Tesla announced a delay in their Robotaxi event. Meta Platforms with the stock we always kick things off with, down nearly 6.5%. As Meta started the week at 532, trending big time down. You'll see it technically as well later in the show. End of the week, close to $498 per share. Now, Meta and cell phone provider Vodafone are teaming up to optimize short-form videos to boost network efficiency. So I think what Vodafone found was, well, when people are playing all these videos on Instagram Reels and Facebook, well, it's putting a lot of pressure on our 4G and 5G network. Well, Meta made some tweaks and some adjustments, and they're able to deliver these short-form videos without putting as much pressure on the network, so that should be good for Meta and really all companies involved. Now, Meta is set to release its largest language model, Llama 3 model, later this month as the company continues to roll these out in open source format. Now, the company has rolled out Llama 3 in an 8 billion and I believe a 70 billion parameter version. But this one that's coming next week or by the end of the month could have as many as 405 billion parameters. It'll also be multimodal, which means it can do both images and text, maybe potentially audio and video as well. Be interesting how to see it's received in the communities, and it's probably bullish for the data centers as well, since that big of a parameter model probably takes up some juice at the data center. Now, Meta dipping this week as analysts are pointing to ongoing weakness in e-commerce ads. Now, we're seeing really across the board when we start to look at earnings. We saw Nike last week have a major dip as they pulled in their guidance. I was just reading a report on a company called Five Below, ticker symbol 5. They were talking about how the week after Easter, they've just seen a complete collapse in terms of kind of discretionary spending from consumers. We're seeing restaurants chains like Red Lobster and Mod Pizza basically going bankrupt. A lot of pressure on the consumer. I think we've reached a tipping point as it relates certainly to kind of the low-end discretionary spend from the consumer. They've ran out of their savings from COVID. They've ran up their credit cards, and now they're starting to pull back. That will negatively impact Meta a little bit on those e-commerce ads, although you tend as an advertiser to maybe pull back during these months where there's fairs going on. There's a lot of travel related to the July 4th holiday, but also summer being out, kids being at home. You've got the back to school season that kind of kicks off maybe new discretionary spending. And then obviously you get into the fourth quarter where Meta should benefit. Now, moving on to Apple, start of the week at 223. You're going to love this technically, up nearly 3% to finish the week, over $230 per share. Now, Microsoft, no friend of Apple in the past, but they're telling their China-based employees they better ditch their Android phones for iPhones. Otherwise, they are not going to be able to use them at work because Android is not supported as well and maybe have some security holes in the country of China. So you got to jump on that iPhone. Seems like an endorsement for the iPhone security there. Now, Samsung's watch is going to have a metabolic health tracking feature that Apple lacks, at least at the current time. Now, we've run over some press releases and some rumors on the next Apple Watch, slightly thinner displays, slightly thinner and larger displays, parts of the watch likely to be 3D printed as well. And we don't know some of the other features. Apple tends to be a step behind Samsung, but it obviously proven not to be that big of a deal. Now, Mac shipments, Macintosh computers, MacBook laptops are outpacing the broader PC market. That's probably not good for companies like AMD, Qualcomm, and Intel, but certainly good for Mac as we move into a heightened back-to-school season where a lot of these computers get bought up. Now, Microsoft and Apple are ditching their OpenAI seats. Talked about how this last week, how Apple secured a potentially a spot on the board. Also, Microsoft tend to be an observing role, not necessarily a formal role on the board, but they are both ditching that amid antitrust scrutiny as both of these companies trying to get out in front of that. Now, Apple Vision Pro headset unlikely to breach 500,000 units in sales. And again, for a $3.49 trillion company, even at a $4,000 price tag, 500,000 units, or actually under that, is not even going to move the needle from even a rounding perspective on this company's sales. And there's no one that is less surprised than me at this, as we've been long telling you that these $4,000-$5,000 ski goggles just were not going to move the needle. In fact, the last company that I worked for wanted me to do a promotion on the suppliers. They wanted to give some of these away, and I had to tell them to their face, these things are not going to sell. Now, moving on to Amazon, start of the week at 200, drifting down by about 3%. Part of that has to do with the fact that maybe Mr. Jeff Bezos continues to unload his shares. He unloaded 863 million shares, and then he followed it up. He said, I need a little bit more money than that. I need another $450 million of stock, as Jeff Bezos is unloading his shares at the top. I bet he's enjoying life on his yacht with that beautiful young lady that he is dating. Now, Amazon unveiled a new Echo Spot. This is an alarm clock ahead of Prime Day, so that'll be interesting. Amazon should catch some headlines heading into next week. We'll see if they're positive or negative around Prime Day. This would be a really good chance for Amazon. Again, as we've talked about, the consumer is super stretched. Prices have just continued to go up. I know the CPI report was good, but it didn't mean prices are starting to go down necessarily. Well, they're unveiling this new alarm clock, $80 retail, $44.99. We'll see if Amazon just gives away stuff on Prime Day. That could generate some positive headlines. Now, the company is looking to regain some AI credibility. This is a tough headline with their AWS App Studio. So this App Studio is going to allow users to create software apps straight from written prompts. So it's maybe bypassing the need for a lot of developers or maybe a large team of them. Certainly you could maybe do more with less these days, as we see those IT jobs just drying up all across Silicon Valley. Now, the NBA is setting up news, streaming, and TV deals with NBC, which will be a new entrance there. Amazon, also a brand new entrance, and ESPN, which has showed games in the past. It's leaving TNT, longtime partner TNT, in the dark, but the company still can match the offers, which they may not be able to do. Amazon Prime Video looks like they're going to be streaming regular season NBA games, likely on Friday nights and Saturday nights. The typical nights that you see NBA streamed, I think on TNT, was Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, the company is going to release their AI-powered shopping assistant across all of the apps. I don't know if you guys use the Amazon app. I did notice in the right-hand corner there was an AI assistant there. Haven't really used it or played around with it, but what I did notice, and this may have been something that's happened for a little while, but I haven't really noticed it, is they're summarizing the reviews using AI. So they take into account all the, you're on a certain product for Amazon, it'll take into account all the reviews and then summarize it. I found that particularly useful, as my son has gotten into fish and aquariums, and we were buying a fish tank and all the stuff. I didn't know anything about aquariums. I got to say, the AI summarized reviews actually help speed up the process and helped me buy some stuff on Amazon. Moving on to Netflix, start of the week at 681. The company reports their earnings July 18th, so just 6 days from now. I'll run down the rest of these companies when we get to the technical segment in terms of the date they report their earnings. Just 6 days from Netflix earnings, and we got rejected at the most logical area. We'll see if this company is able to rebound on earnings, but shares of Netflix down basically 5% this week to finish the week at 647. Not a lot of news out of Netflix because they are in a quiet period, but David Ellison is taking control of Paramount, and he's looking to transform it into a media and tech company, as shares of Paramount have been under pressure for a while. Moving on to NVIDIA, start of the week at 130, slipping sideways. A little up and down market for NVIDIA this week. Finished the week basically flat at $129. Now, chip maker Intel had a great week. Shares are up huge, not only for the last week, but certainly over the last month or so. Company saying it's on path to see $1 billion in cumulative software revenue by the end of 2027. Now, you got to take this with a little bit of grain of salt. The fact the company does quarterly revenue in that $12 to $13 billion range. Also, this is not until 2027, although on this $1 billion in cumulative revenue that is being led by a former head of VMware, which was acquired, I believe, by Broadcom. You got to assume on this $1 billion in revenue, you probably got a lot of margin now. So what these chip companies are doing is they've seen the playbook that NVIDIA has had with their CUDA software and all the software libraries they've kind of rolled out on top of that. And they're saying, well, we can really generate a lot of revenue and a lot of profits in this segment. AMD announced another acquisition of an AI company. They did another one earlier this year. This one, they actually announced how much they paid, $665 million. Now, Jensen Huang's not sitting around. He's seeing Jeff Bezos get rich selling his shares, and he says, I want a piece of that too. He sold another $30 million of his shares, which is actually rather insignificant in terms of his total portfolio and ownership of NVIDIA. Moving on to Google. Started the week at 188, down about 1.7%, finished the week at $185 per share. We've been talking about it for weeks now, maybe even over a month. HubSpot, which is ticker symbol HUBS. It was rumored that Google was in talks for an acquisition. Also, Amazon, maybe another bidder in there as well, but the company is sinking after a report that Google is shelving its acquisition plans. In fact, we learned that they didn't really even get to detailed talks around due diligence. So it was really more poking around by Google, and HubSpot sinking on that news could mean that somebody else comes in there and gets it. Now, OpenAI is creating some competition for Google, guys. They are rolling out potentially a search product that is coming here very, very soon. You got to imagine Bing as well could potentially be under pressure as Google holds quite a lead in search, and any entrants also could entrench on Bing. Now, speaking of Bing, owned by Microsoft, started the week at $466.50. Down about 2.75%, finished the week at $453 and some change. Now, OpenAI models, I tell you what, if you're in China, you can't get your hands on the high-end NVIDIA chips, AMD chips, any of the high-end AI chips, but what you're going to be able to do is use Microsoft Azure to gain access to OpenAI. So this is one way around the high-end chip ban. Well, you got to use our models here in the United States. We'll see how that works out for China. Now, Microsoft is ditching its OpenAI board seat. We talked about this in the Apple segment, as it might not quell FTC concerns. Now, here's the overarching thing that's very interesting. As we move into the political season, there's stuff that presidents do that do impact the stock market to a degree of sorts. Probably one of the biggest differences between current President Joe Biden and former President Trump could be how the FTC is handled. You got to imagine if Joe Biden, if this is his last term and former President Trump comes back in, Lena Khan, which is heading up the FTC, she'll be shown the door, maybe one of the first people shown the door. However, former President Trump is certainly no friend of Microsoft or anywhere of big tech. So it'll be one of these complicated relationships, and certainly something that I monitor very closely, because these companies that we cover here on a weekly basis, they, as you know, are sitting on mountains and mountains of cash. And if the FTC is going to turn the other way and you're not going to have a lot of regulatory scrutiny, well, companies like Google could buy HubSpot without any worry. Microsoft could continue to have board seats and continue to buy other AI companies without any concerns, at least over the next 3 to 4 years. But again, the wild card is that former President Trump, not exactly a fan of most of these companies. Now, moving on to Tesla. It was an up and down week for Tesla as it started the week at 245. Surprisingly enough, Tesla ended the week higher by 1.2%, finished the week at 248 and some change. But initially, you had a 7% drop on Tesla as they reported a delay in their Robotaxi event. Instead of being August 8th as planned, they're going to delay it in October. My guess is Tesla had to get out in front of this announcement since they report earnings in just 11 days on July 23rd. They have a quiet period where they can't really maybe even announce news like this. So they had to get out in front of it this week and announce it. What I thought was interesting in this announcement is they talked about how that the sources are indicating that the event might not take place until October. So this is not really confirmed. But here's what was interesting, because Tesla needs more time to actually build the autonomous vehicle prototypes This is not the Robotaxi that many Tesla shareholders, even Tesla car owners, have been sold in the past. What Elon Musk has sold Tesla shareholders and certainly car owners in the past is you are going to take your existing Tesla that might be sitting in your driveway 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 23 hours a day, and you are going to be able to push a button and it was going to be able to go out and magically be a, quote, Robotaxi, and you were going to be able to make as much, I think Elon Musk has said, maybe $25,000 to $30,000 a year based on your Tesla. Well, why are they having to build autonomous vehicle prototypes? This is a completely different idea where you're going to have to build out a new specific model, potentially without a steering wheel, have to go through all types of safety tests, have to roll this out through different jurisdictions. Again, people are going to be super excited about autonomous. People are going to be pumping this Robotaxi idea, and certainly I could do that. I've got Teslas in the driveway. Again, my former employer wanted me to pump this type of stuff, but I said, you got to pump the brakes on this stuff. San Francisco, Miami, New York, Austin, Texas, parts of Arizona, they're going to allow you to probably roll these Robotaxis out. That might bring in some revenue, but we're talking about a $768 billion company here. This Robotaxi thing has got to be really, really, really big for it to actually move the needle. And if we now have to design and build autonomous vehicle prototypes, guys, as usual with Tesla, we are years away, probably 5, 6, 7 years away from the Robotaxi thing actually being something. Now, Tesla unveiling a new Model 3 long-range variant with a $7,500 tax credit. That's another thing that could come under pressure as we move into election. I know we're several months away, but we got to have discussions around this. There's obviously been a lot of movement politically with Joe Biden struggling maybe a little bit or a lot, depending on who you ask, in terms of his performance lately. These tax credits, I think, President Trump has really outlined this specifically in his agenda, that these tax credits are going away. So that's something to think about as you move forward. And maybe Elon Musk, who has some influence in Washington to a certain degree, could maybe get in the president's or maybe the next president's ear and reverse that decision. We'll get to Tesla here in a moment. Look at the S&P 500. It is still on the, I mean, we have multiple uptrends going. We've got kind of a long, well, obviously you have like kind of a lifetime uptrend that you're in. You're in a shorter, intermediate term channel. Shorter term, you're kind of really steep, well above trend on this one. Not super excited about accumulating shares as we move into earnings season. Meta, actually very surprisingly, at least to me, reversed before earnings. Now, Meta reports their earnings on July 31st. So we got a little ways before the company reports. No real significant headlines around Meta other than that kind of negative e-commerce news by an analyst that certainly wasn't confirmed. But you had a major reversal up here, although it did create a new higher high. So that is positive from a technical perspective. It did somewhat cancel out kind of the shorter term channel that we were making. So we'll start erasing some lines. You should have some support down here with Meta at about 481. That would be an area where it's kind of interesting. Although, again, with these companies just 2-3 weeks away from earnings, I'd probably just take a hands-off approach, wait to see what happens during earnings, and then make a decision there. Now, moving on to Apple. They report their earnings I have on August 1st, so slightly later than normal for Apple, but we are on a breakneck uptrend. This one looking absolutely beautiful, not even hesitating, continuing to move higher. Dips in Apple really should be bought, it looks like, at least in the shorter term. Now, Jeff Bezos stepped in. He said, psych, I am selling Amazon at all-time highs, and that's what he did. Unloaded $1 billion. That's what he did, but still looking good technically. You're right in the middle of a channel. This is where you can actually step in if you want to on Amazon. But again, Amazon reports their earnings on July 25th, less than 2 weeks away. So I'd wait to see what they report. Now, the first company to report their earnings will be Netflix. Like I said, July 18th, 6 days from now, we finally hit our destiny. We were talking about for a while. Up here at $700, it was like destiny. Netflix would hit it and kind of get rejected. Now we're just waiting for earnings. Can we move higher, get maybe back up into the $700 range? I don't know what Netflix would have to report to really like put up a green candle over and above, although we've seen that. Certainly really strong quarter, but more importantly, maybe guidance, some subscriber growth, those types of things could really push Netflix higher. You get rejected in Netflix, it actually could be a pretty big rejection. You've got areas that make sense back at 550, lower than that, really anything lower than that. I think you're looking to buy that one. Now, moving on to NVIDIA, just still looking great. Obviously, you're in this kind of longer term kind of channel upwards. We are at the top of the range. This is not where you're like mega excited about being in NVIDIA, at least from a new position standpoint. We are going to converge on two areas of support. A shorter and a longer term should emerge here at about 120. We should get some chip makers reporting their earnings next week. I think TSM will report. We also will hear from AMD and Intel as well. Could impact NVIDIA as they are the last to report on August 15th. Now, we got Google reporting their earnings on July 23rd, just 11 days from now. Looking Apple-like, just absolutely powering higher, making higher highs, just confirming that all along the way. Google looking absolutely sensational. I think you wait for a little bit of a breakdown in this like kind of skyrocketing trend. Looking to get back into Google, that's for sure. Microsoft looking absolutely fantastic. Still in this beautiful channels, trading right around the middle. Got rejected actually right at the middle of the channel. You got Microsoft reporting their earnings the same day as Google on July 23rd, which is typical. Pullbacks to the bottom of the channel with Microsoft, which could be in kind of that 440-ish range, should be bought. And now finally, Tesla, which broken out from kind of the downward channel that it was in more recently. I suppose we could take that off, although what I like to do though is keep the top of the channel line in, and it, you know, kind of depends on how you look at this thing, where you want to draw it in, because when you break out from the top, you tend to have these little back tests. Back tests can be an area where you buy. Obviously with Tesla, based on the kind of the breakneck breakout that it had, could be a big pullback back to call it 200. The company reports their earnings, it looks like to me, a little bit later than normal. Looks like they're reporting the same day as Google, Microsoft, and Tesla on July 23rd. That'll be a busy day. We'll have to turn the air conditioner on in this room maybe. Otherwise, we'd be sweating our nuts off covering the earnings. Tesla, a good earnings report should push us back up into the 260s. 290 should be an area of resistance as well for Tesla. But no matter the gyrations that the stock made this week, you have solidly closed and broken out of this trend. You, though, however, are still more roughly sideways on this one. You'd really like to see this one get, obviously, above $300 per share. You get above 300, you've got probably a Netflix-like destiny to retest the highs, which are close to 420, I believe, on Tesla. Folks, that was FAANG Stock Recap Show for Friday, July 12th. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe and hopefully maybe potentially cool weekend. We'll be back next week with more earnings and obviously the FAANG Stock Recap Show next Friday. Enjoy your weekend and good luck with your investments.